Moore stood at the main entrance of the wedding venue, where the shimmering light from crystal chandeliers reflected across the polished marble floor. The scent of white roses filled the air, blending with the soft melody of a violin, making everything around her feel like a perfect painting. She glanced around and allowed herself a satisfied smile. This was her nephew Daniel's wedding, an event she had played a major role in creating, from selecting every tiny detail to covering all the expenses. But as she stepped closer to the gate, her navy silk dress suddenly felt out of place among the dazzling crowd. Her son Thomas stopped her, his eyes cold as he said, "Mom, your name isn't on the list." The words hit Evelyn like a slap, leaving her frozen. She stood there, right in front of the entrance, a painful tightness rising in her chest. The world around her seemed to slow down. She could not breathe, as if the air had vanished. Thomas's words tore through the grandeur of the celebration, and in that moment, Evelyn knew she was no longer part of the family. Everything she had done, every dollar she had spent, every hour she had devoted to this wedding, all of it suddenly meant nothing. She could not believe it. Her own nephew's wedding, an event she had supported without hesitation, had become the very place where she was cast aside. She had spent her entire life sacrificing for her family, yet now they treated her like an object, nothing more. She turned to look at Lauren, Thomas's wife, searching for even a trace of shame, any sign of discomfort, but there was none. Lauren simply offered a faint smile, as if nothing serious had happened. A deep ache settled into Evelyn's heart. She had poured in so much money and effort, yet all she received in return was indifference. There was not a hint of respect for her, the woman who had sacrificed her whole life to nurture, care for, and build this family. The crowd around her began to whisper, their eyes drifting toward her. Some stole glances, others looked away, as if afraid of being drawn into the heavy silence. Everything around Evelyn suddenly blurred. She stood there, a cold emptiness wrapping around her, as she realized a painful truth. She was no longer a mother, no longer a grandmother, no longer family. She had become nothing more than a wallet, discarded once she was no longer needed. The hollow ache inside her made her want to cry, but she did not. She remained silent, then turned and walked away. She crossed the garden, each step feeling endlessly heavy. With every step, the distance grew clearer, not only from her family, but from everything she had built over the years. When she reached the gate, she looked back, still unable to believe what had just happened. The driver was waiting. He looked at her with concern, not understanding what had occurred. "Is something wrong, Mrs. Moore?" he asked gently. She quietly got into the car, closed her eyes for a brief moment, then said, "No, I just remembered something important." On the way home, the light slowly faded, the street lamps dimming as the sun disappeared. Evelyn gazed out the window, her heart empty. She thought about the years that had passed, the days she had lived for her family, for her son, for her grandson. She remembered the sleepless nights caring for Thomas when he was little, the long days of hard work to ensure he never lacked anything. And what had she received in return? Today, she had been left standing outside her own nephew's wedding, rejected like a stranger. The emotion rose in her throat, ready to spill over. But in that moment, a strange clarity came to Evelyn. She realized something she had long refused to face. She had spent her entire life trying to please others, trying to be needed by them. But now she understood that she no longer had to live that way. She did not have to be a tool for her family to use. She did not have to endure such disrespect. When she arrived home, Evelyn stood at the door, looking into the quiet room. She glanced at the clock on the wall, each ticking second echoing like an accusation against herself. She walked into the bedroom and removed the silk dress she had chosen with so much hope. She folded it carefully, then stopped, letting it fall to the floor. She sat down on the bed, staring at it, feeling a shift deep within her. From this moment on, Evelyn was no longer the mother or grandmother her family believed they could take advantage of. She had come to understand that her true power was not her money, but her ability to decide her own life. As she sat in the darkness, a new sense of calm and determination spread within her. She no longer needed to chase after anyone. She was strong enough to take control of her own life. The next morning, when Evelyn woke up, the room was as still as ever. The first rays of sunlight slipped through the window, illuminating the photograph of her late husband, Michael, resting on the bedside table. Her gaze lingered on it, her eyes softening with a mix of sweet and bitter memories. She remembered the days when everything was built on love and shared effort, when she and Michael created a warm and humble home together. But now, all of it existed only in memory. Michael was gone, and she, though still alive, felt as if a part of her life had already died. She got up and leaned against the window, looking outside. Birds soared freely across the bright sky, as if nothing could hold them back. Evelyn felt her heart tighten as she thought about her family, about the years she had spent tirelessly sacrificing for her children and grandchildren. All she had received from her son Thomas and his wife Lauren was neglect and exploitation. They never asked about her, never cared about her feelings. She had become like an invisible shadow, only valued when she could offer something useful. But now that she saw the truth, everything had changed. Evelyn was no longer the same mother, no longer the same grandmother. She had gone through the greatest transformation of her life. No longer afraid, no longer wounded, she decided she would not allow those who had used her to continue controlling her life. It was a decision she had never imagined she would make. But life has moments that force you to face the truth, even the most painful one. She walked into the small study at the back of the house, a place she had not visited in a long time. In a drawer, she found old files, contracts, and important documents she had kept over the years. There were company agreements that she and Michael had signed, assets they had built together. A faint smile appeared on her lips. Michael used to say that even if everything was lost, one thing would never disappear: intelligence and clarity. Over the 11 years since her husband passed away, Evelyn had learned how to manage finances and handle contracts. She was not only a mother or a grandmother, she was also a strong woman who knew how to run affairs and take control of her life. She reopened the documents related to Daniel's wedding. Every expense, every contract with vendors carried her signature. She had paid for everything, from the venue to the menu, from the music to the floral arrangements. She had secured every detail, yet now she realized she was no longer considered family. Everything had originated from her, yet she was the one pushed out of the very event she had helped create. Evelyn sat down at the desk, picked up her phone, and called Harold Bennett, the family's longtime lawyer. Harold had helped her handle legal matters after Michael's passing. They had worked together for years, and she felt reassured knowing she could rely on him. The call was brief, but she could hear the concern in his voice as he listened to what had happened the day before. "Evelyn, I understand. What do you need me to do?" he asked. "Harold," Evelyn said, her voice calm but firm, "I want you to prepare the legal documents for me. I want to take back what belongs to me." Harold did not ask another question. He simply replied, "I will help you. See you tomorrow morning." When the call ended, Evelyn felt a strange sense of relief. She no longer felt helpless. She had decided to stand up for herself, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. Every decision she made from now on would be hers alone. No one else could change that. The next morning, Evelyn met Harold at his office. They sat in a quiet room, soft light streaming through the window onto the stacks of documents on the table. She looked at the contracts and receipts she had signed. A different feeling filled her. She was no longer invisible. Every signature on those papers was proof of the power she had held over the years, a power not rooted in money or physical strength, but in patience, intelligence, and the ability to navigate every situation in life. Harold looked at Evelyn, his eyes filled with understanding. "Evelyn, you don't need to worry. Everything is clear," he said. Evelyn nodded, her gaze steady with determination. "I'm not worried. I'm just doing what needs to be done." She was no longer the same grandmother, no longer the same mother. She had become a strong, independent woman who knew how to reclaim what was rightfully hers. The days of being used were over. Now she no longer acted out of pity or the need to be accepted. She had stood up for herself, taken back what belonged to her, and begun to rebuild her life in the way she chose. She could feel the change, the newfound strength within her. She had returned. 3 months after the incident at the wedding, Evelyn Moore was no longer the woman she used to be. She was no longer the submissive mother, the gentle grandmother who was always ready to sacrifice for her family. She'd become a woman of strength, fully aware of her own worth and ready to protect it. Every morning, when sunlight streamed through the window, she no longer looked into memories filled with sorrow, but toward a future she was building with her own hands. She knew it would not be easy, but she had made her decision, and nothing could change it. LD, the family's lawyer, Evelyn had begun to act more decisively than ever before. She stopped all regular financial transfers to Thomas and Lauren. The money they had taken for granted was cut off without explanation. She moved forward step by step, reclaiming what was rightfully hers. In the first weeks after cutting off financial support, Evelyn focused entirely on changing her own life, paying no attention to the disturbances around her. She learned to manage her finances, transferring her assets into secure accounts where no one else could access them. She spent much of skills. The technology classes she attended were not just about gaining knowledge, but a journey of rediscovering herself. Evelyn began to master tools she had never imagined using before: financial software, online security systems, and digital banking applications. She learned how to protect her accounts, how to transfer money safely, and how to manage everything she had built over the years. This sense of control gave her a strength she could not put into words. During this time, she also joined her area, where they shared life experiences and supported one another in daily life. She no longer felt alone. At each meeting, she felt like part of a community where she was valued not for her money, but for who she truly was. She realized that there were things more important than wealth and sacrifice. She learned to listen and to share, something she had never done before because she had always been too busy taking care of others. Yet throughout those months, despite the outward progress, there was within Evelyn's heart. She could not forget Thomas's first phone call after everything happened. The feeling of being uncared for, of being unloved, still haunted her whenever she thought of her son. But Evelyn understood that this pain was necessary. It was what would make her stronger. She allowed herself to feel it, and little by little, she moved beyond it. Finally, after 3 months had passed, one day her phone rang. Evelyn looked at Neil, her grandson. She hesitated for a moment before answering, hoping this would not bring another wave of pain. "Grandma," Daniel's voice was soft, unfamiliar in its tone. I don't know what to say anymore. I did thing before, but now I do." His words felt like a door opening inside Evelyn. She listened as Daniel spoke about the struggles in his marriage, after everything the way people said we should, but now everything is falling apart. We tried to create a perfect wedding, but nothing changed beneath that surface. Daniel's words made Evelyn pause. She felt no satisfaction, no judgment, only a deep sense of understanding. She listened without rushing to conk. "Money can solve everything?" she asked. It was not a question of mockery, but a quiet reminder, for both herself and Daniel, of what truly matters in life. "I don't think so anymore, Grandma," Daniel admitted. "I've realized that things can be lost, but love and respect are what truly last." Evelyn did not reply and looked out the window where the evening light was slowly fading. The lingering haze in her heart began to clear. "I love you, Daniel. She wants you to learn what I had to learn, so you don't repeat my mistakes." Daniel was silent for a moment, then said, "I will learn from you, Grandma." The call ended, but Evelyn felt that something within her had been healed. She felt neither satisfaction nor revenge, but auntie always easy. But with confidence and love, things will eventually find their paths. We decided she would no longer allow herself to be used. She knew she would never return to the life where she had to sacrifice just to be loved. Evelyn Moore, the woman who had once been cast aside and forgotten, had now found peace within her own life. She no longer chased after the expectations of others, but began living the life she truly deserved. A week had passed since Daniel's call, and Evelyn Moore could clearly feel the change within herself. She no longer lived in pain or in the feeling of being used. Each morning when she woke up, she no longer felt emptiness in her soul. Instead, she felt alive, filled with determination. She was no longer the woman who silently accepted everything, but someone who knew exactly what she wanted and would never allow anyone else to decide for her again. She spent most of her week continuing to learn. Evelyn had always had a deep passion for learning, But in the past, she had sacrificed her personal interests for the sake of her family. Now, after everything that had happened, she finally made time for herself. She took online classes on financial techniques, asset management software, and even information security. She wanted to make sure no one could ever manipulate her again. And she also wanted full control over her finances without relying on anyone. Every evening, as the sun set and night slowly fell, Evelyn would sit at her desk. The soft yellow light from her desk lamp gently illuminated the documents, contracts, and reports she had neatly arranged. She looked at the assets and agreements she had signed over the years and could not help but smile. Evelyn knew that she was not just the one who had financially supported the family, she was also the one who held control over her own life. Those assets belonged to no one but her. With her newfound confidence, Evelyn began to reassess her relationships within the family. She no longer felt the need to try to be accepted or to prove herself as part of them. She realized that everything she had done for Thomas and Lauren for Daniel had not truly come from love, but from a long-standing emptiness within her, a desire to be loved and acknowledged. But now she understood clearly. Love is not something that can be bought with money, and recognition cannot be forced from others. However, Evelyn's transformation did not stop at rediscovering herself. She began to notice clear changes in how others treated her. Thomas and Lauren, though they had not contacted her directly, were still watching her from a distance, and their silence only made her more aware of the power she now held. Even so, Evelyn felt no satisfaction, no desire for revenge. She simply lived her life without needing anyone's permission. Things began to shift one morning when she received an unexpected call. Evelyn answered and recognized Thomas's familiar voice. "Mom, can we talk?" His tone sounded different, no longer harsh or distant like before. Evelyn paused for a moment, feeling an unusual calm. She had already prepared herself for whatever might come. "What is it, Thomas?" Her voice was gentle, but carried a seriousness he could not ignore. "Can we meet?" Thomas continued, his voice now slightly urgent. "Lauren and I, we want to talk things through." Evelyn sat up straight and looked out the window. "What is there left to say? I've already understood everything, Thomas. What you needed was not me, but my money, and I've already cut that off." Silence lingered for a few seconds. Evelyn could not hear Thomas's voice. She did not know how he would respond, but she felt no fear. In fact, she felt a sense of relief. Finally, Thomas spoke. "Mom, I understand now, but maybe we still need to meet. We were wrong." She smiled faintly, though her eyes remained cold. "Then come see me, but don't expect me to change my decision. It's too late." Evelyn did not expect an apology or a transformation from Thomas. She knew things could never return to the way they once were. She only hoped that he could learn a lesson about respect, not just because of money, but because of who people truly are. When the call ended, Evelyn felt a deep and unusual sense of peace. She knew that whatever happened next, she would not be drawn back into those emotional games again. She had decided she would no longer live in emotional deprivation, but instead live the life she deserved, a life of freedom, not bound to anyone, not even by family, because she had finally found herself. She spent the rest of that morning focusing on her personal projects. Every step she took, every decision she made, became a milestone that affirmed she was no longer a woman to be used, but someone strong and powerful. No one could take her freedom away anymore. She had found herself again, and this life, at last, belonged only to her. A month after the meeting with Thomas, Evelyn had completely transformed. She was no longer the weak and submissive woman she once was. She had become independent, confident, and no one could decide her life for her anymore. The choices she made were no longer influenced by fear or emotional emptiness. Every morning when she woke up, she no longer felt restless or anxious about what might come next. She knew she was living the life she truly deserved. Was not only external, but also within her thoughts and emotions. Each day, Evelyn spent more time on herself, exploring things she had never had the chance to pursue before. The courses she took in financial management and cybersecurity not only made her feel stronger, but also helped her realize that the ability to learn and grow has no limits. Evelyn began to enjoy learning. diving into fields she had never imagined herself entering. She came to understand that life is always full of opportunities, and age is not a barrier. Day by day, Evely dawned within her soul. She no longer had to worry about family events she had once been forced to attend. She no longer cared about what others would think when she refused to provide financial support. Every time she thought about the past, she felt a sense of relief. She had stopped and set boundaries for herself, something she had never dared to do before. She no longer had to endure unreasonable demands, no longer felt the need to sacrifice just to receive a small amount of recognition. Everything now was her decision. Even so, Evelyn could not completely FD, especially when it came to her relationship with her son and daughter-in-law. She could not deny that there were moments when she felt a sense of loss. She thought about Thomas, about the days when he would run into her arms as a child, about the nights she stayed awake, caring for him when he was sick, about the years she worked tirelessly so he would never lack love or attention. But now, the son she had once placed all her faith in had turned his back on her. He had not only distanced himself, but had also used her for money. Evelyn tried to forget those memories, but deep down, she still felt a quiet regret for the son she had raised. One morning, while organizing financial documents in her St. Nother call, this time it was from Lauren. She was surprised to see Lauren's name appear on her screen because it had been a long time since she had heard from her. Evelyn still remembered clearly the day Lauren had treated her like a decorative object at Daniel's wedding. She had not intended to continue this relationship, but deep inside, there was still a small hope that perhaps if they had changed, they would recognize their mistakes. Evelyn answered the call, and Lauren's voice came through immediately, as if she did for it. Evelyn, I'm sorry I didn't reach out to you sooner. I know you may be angry with me, but I truly want to talk to you about a few things. Evelyn sat up straight and closed her eyes for a moment to steady herself. She no longer needed anyone, need their sympathy or justification for what had happened. But she still chose to listen. What do you want to say? She asked calmly, without emotion. Lauren continued, We were wrong, and I know that. After the wedding, things didn't turn out the way we expected. Daniel, difficulties in our marriage, and I've realized that what you did for us truly mattered. I now understand that we used you and treated you like a tool. I'm very sorry for the way I treated you. Evelyn listened, but she felt no sympathy. Lauren's apology could not erase the pain she had endured. Still, she had no desire to argue or get tired of pointless battles. Lauren, Evelyn said, her voice gentle but firm, thank you for your apology, but it doesn't change anything. You and Thomas made your choices, and I've made mine. This is the end. The call ended, and Evelyn felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. She no longer felt burdened by empty apologies. She had let go. Those who did not respect her did not cess. She had learned the most important lesson of her life. No one has the right to make you feel like you are not enough. Love is not a transaction or an exchange. It is built on respect and sincerity. And she was strong enough to understand that. For the rest of that week, Evelyn continued living her new life. She no longer concerned herself with those who had hurt her. She focused on developing herself, finding joy in the moments she had missed over the years. She no longer needed anyone to validate her worth. She had found that value within herself. After the call from Lauren, Evelyn felt as if a new door had opened within her soul. She no longer saw herself as a victim of her family, but as the one in control of her own life. The world around her seemed lighter. Nothing had changed materially. Yet inside her, something profound had shifted. Evelyn had stopped, set clear boundaries for herself, and begun living the life she truly wanted. Followed. She did not just stop at redefining her relationships, she also turned her attention to her own work. She realized that the past months had drained too much of her energy and emotions. The calls from Thomas, Lauren, and others no longer stirred any anxiety in her. Evelyn understood that happiness is not something that can be given by anyone but herself. She no longer wanted to live in expectation or an invisible sacrifice. Each morning, Eve faced anyone or to solve family problems. She woke up to live for herself. Her steps during those days felt lighter, freer. She spent time on herself, teaching herself new skills, reading books, attending classes on finance and technology. In the past, she had ignored her personal interests because she was always worried about others. But now, she knew she had to take care of herself first, so she could set an example for others. One of the first steps Evelyn took was ancient accounts. After meeting Harold and completing all legal procedures, she began transferring her assets, investing in separate funds and accounts that no one else could access. She handled everything quietly, without display, simply protecting what belonged to her. Evelyn understood that in life, power does not come only from how much money you have, but from your ability to control and protect it. She did not need anyone's help, only her own patience and determination. Throughout this process, Evelyn realized something important each of her life, living to please others. Now, she no longer wanted to live in the shadow of expectations from family or society. She no longer wanted to be invisible in her own family, existing only to fulfill the demands of her children and others. She no longer needed validation from anyone. She had learned to love herself, to accept her past mistakes, and to continue walking the path she had chosen. However, as if it were a final test, Thomas eventually reached out again. It was organizing her financial documents when her phone rang. She saw that it was her son. She could not deny that a small part of her still hoped he had realized his mistakes. But she also knew she was prepared. She would not be drawn back into emotional manipulation. She no longer felt the need to chase anyone's affection, and she did not want to hear empty apologies or excuses. "Hi, Mom. Can I talk to you?" Thomas's voice sounded hesitant. Evelyn looked at her phone, her confusion or pain. "What is it, Thomas?" she replied evenly. "I don't know how to fix it, but Mom, I really want to see you and talk about everything." Evelyn could hear him strike words. She noticed the change in his tone, but her heart remained steady. "Fix it?" she said with a faint smile. "What you've done cannot be changed. You chose to live your life your way. Now, so do I. I don't need your apology anymore. I've already healed myself." Silence followed. Evelyn could sense his confusion and unease. She did not want to continue the conversation because she knew nothing would change. They were only words. The call Ewine felt a peace she had never known before. She no longer allowed anger or resentment to control her. She was no longer waiting for others to change. She had learned that to allow herself to be loved and respected, and that could only come from within. The next day, Evelyn continued doing the things she loved. She kept learning, growing, and most importantly, taking care of herself. She had left the past behind, not because she no longer loved her family, but because she undid herself. She could love others more sincerely. She no longer needed apologies. She only needed to live the life she deserved. And so, Evelyn not only changed her life, but also discovered that freedom and peace are not something found in the change of others. They come from within each of us, when we dare to live as our true selves. Every morning when she woke up, Evelyn felt something different in both her body and her mind. She was no longer overwhelmed by anxiety or confusion over other people's decisions. She no longer lived within the wounds of the past, but in a new life she had created for herself. The exhausting, tense days when she had to face deception and exploitation from her son and daughter-in-law had now faded into distant memories. She had learned to let go, and that brought her a kind of peace she had never experienced before. And technological skills she had learned, Evelyn not only managed her assets effectively, but also felt stronger than ever. She had begun making important decisions on her own, without depending on anyone else. She was no longer the weak mother or grandmother who lived only for others. She had found herself again, rediscovered the power and freedom she had lost for so many years. That sense of freedom was incredible, like a fresh breeze passing through her soul, bringing renewal and hope. But life is never... She had decided not to let the past control her anymore. Her transformation was not an easy process. Each day, she still faced conflicting thoughts and emotions. She could not deny that there were moments when she felt lonely. Whenever she passed by a family gathering, whenever she remembered the crowded dinners where everyone once sat together, she felt a quiet absence within her. But it no longer hurt. She understood that she could not please everyone, and she could not continue living for their expectations. She was living her own life now, and that was enough. One day, as Evelyn sat in her study while it slowly faded, she received an unexpected call. On the other end was Thomas. After all the silence, after everything that had happened, her son was calling her again. She could hear the anxiety in his voice. "Mom, I know I was wrong. I've realized a lot. Can you give?" Thomas's voice was no longer cold as before. She did not hear criticism or blame, a trace of regret and a desire to reconcile. Yet Evelyn no longer felt hesitant or afraid like she once had. She had learned that if she did not respect herself first, no one else would. And in that moment, she realized she did not need to wait for anyone's apology to feel at peace. She had already freed herself. "What is it, Thomas?" she asked, her voice still gentle but firm. She knew this call would not fix a conversation they both had to face. "Mom, can we meet? I want to apologize for everything that happened. Lauren and I were wrong." Thomas hesitated. "Then Kanto, how much you helped us, and I'm truly sorry for not appreciating you. You didn't deserve to be treated that way." Evelyn listened quietly, but she no longer felt the sympathy she once might have. She was no longer someone who needed to be satisfied by Apollo already taking control of her life, and no one could change that. "Thomas," she said, "thank you for your apology, but you know it doesn't change anything. You and Lauren chose your way of living, and so have I. I don't need redemption anymore." A brief silence followed. Evelyn could imagine Thomas searching for words, but she did not want to hear them. She had stepped back and seen everything from a different pane. No more expectation. She had accepted that what was done could not be undone, and she could no longer live for those who did not value her. The call ended quickly, but Evelyn felt an unfamiliar lightness. She did not feel satisfaction nor sadness. She simply felt that she had done the right thing. She was no longer imprisoned meaningless sacrifices. She had become the woman she had always wanted to be, independent, strong, and unwilling to yield to anyone. After that call, Evelyn continued living her life without being affected by what had happened. She did not need to wait for anyone else to change. She did not need to look back, only forward. What she needed: Edom, peace, and power in her own hands. Day after day, Evelyn continued doing what she loved. She spent time caring for herself, continuing to learn, and living a life she deserved. Her life was no longer controlled by expectations or exploitation. She did not need to vent or pay a price for someone's affection. Evelyn had found a way to live freely, and that was all she needed. With a gentle smile on her lips, Evelyn realized that she was not just living, she was truly living fully, no longer confined by anyone. She was free, and that was what mattered most. A month had passed since her conversation with Thomas, and Evelyn felt the sense of peace within her growing stronger each day. As time went by, she no longer felt anxious or restless about family matters or relationships. She no longer had to avoid questions from Thomas or Lauren, no longer had to endure unreasonable demands. Evelyn had truly freed herself from the relationships that had confined her for so many years. Although life was not always easy, she understood that the change she had chosen had not only brought her freedom, but also marked an important turning point in her journey of self-healing. Her days learning new things. Evelyn had never stopped learning, but in the past, she had allowed the needs of her family to consume all her time and attention. Now, she made time to rediscover personal interests she had neglected for years. She took courses in finance, asset management, and new technological skills. Every hour of learning, every evening spent with books, made her feel stronger and more confident in her own abilities. These skills not her assets effectively, but also gave her a sense of control she had never experienced before. Evelyn began to handle everything in her life on her own, without relying on anyone. Her bank accounts, investments, contracts, all were carefully monitored and managed by her. She no longer allowed anyone else to decide for her. Step by step, she rebuilt her life, not only financially, but also emotionally. At the same time, Evelyn began to take evities. She found joy in connecting with new friends, women who shared similar experiences. She joined support groups where they shared stories and challenges in life. It was not only a place for her to learn, but also a place where she rediscovered a sense of belonging, somewhere she no longer felt alone. During this time, Evelyn was no longer haunted by the mista, no longer lived in regret over what had happened or how Thomas and Lauren had treated her. She understood that the past could not be changed, and only the present could shape the future. She no longer allowed anger or sadness to control her mind. The wounds in her heart were slowly healing, not because of forgiveness from others, but because of forgiveness from herself. Even so, Evelyn could not deny that there were still moments when she felt a quay. She looked back at old memories. Whenever she remembered family gatherings and shared moments, she felt a gentle sadness. She remembered dinners with Thomas, the times when she felt like an important part of the family. But now, everything had changed. She was no longer part of that family, at least not in the way she once believed. However, Evelyn did not allow herself to sink into those emotions. She knew she had to keep living. She had decided that she would not let the absence of her loved ones make her weak. She would not return to unhealthy relationships, and she would not live according to anyone else's expectations anymore. Then one day a call came. This time it was not Thomas or Lauren, but Daniel, her grandson. She recognized the familiar New and hesitated for a moment, unsure whether this would be another apology. But she no longer felt afraid. She was strong enough to face anything. "Grandma," Daniel's voice came through the phone. I don't know what to say. "I just want to tell you that I'm truly sorry for not understand. I didn't realize your sacrifices. And now I understand that everything you did was out of love." Daniel's words brought a gentle warmth to Evelyn's heart. She did not feel satisfaction or triumph, only a quiet sense of peace, knowing her grandson had finally undone. She did not need an apology, but she knew the love she had given Daniel was real, and it would always remain in her heart. "I love you, Daniel," Evelyn said softly. "I just want you to understand that love is not something that can be bought with money, but something built on respect and sincerity." "I'm glad." The call ended, and Evelyn felt a deep sense of relief. She did not need to say anything more. Apologies and regret from Thomas and Lauren might never come, but she no longer expected them. She did not need E but herself, and now she knew she had done the right thing. She had learned to love herself, and that was what mattered most. With a gentle smile, Evelyn looked out the window. The world outside remained the same, but inside her, there was an unusual sense of peace. She no longer felt alone. She had found herself again, and that was all she needed. As the days passed, Evelyn felt as though a new chapter of her life was being written with each passing moment. Every morning she woke up without hesitation or worry about calls from Thomas or Lauren, no longer burdened by the expectation of apologies she never truly wanted. Instead, she rose with a quiet sense of peace, a confidence she had not felt in years. The days she had once lived in the shadows of exploitation and disrespect had become nothing more than distant memories. She had taken full control of her life, and no one could control her anymore. Why change emotionally? She continued to grow mentally and intellectually. She spent hours learning new skills, things she had never had the chance to explore before. She studied technology, finance, and even fields she had never imagined herself entering. Classes on asset management software, information security, and life skills did not just give her knowledge, they made her feel as though she was rising, no longer bound by anyone. These changes not Liddy to manage her assets, but also gave her a deeper understanding of life and what truly matters. She was no longer drawn into emotional games, no longer felt the need to live according to other people's expectations. She had found freedom in taking control of her own life. Each day, Evelyn woke up and did what she wanted, without worrying about pleasing anyone or meeting unreasonable demands. She realized that after everything, she no longer needed to wait for others to change. Life is not a reward for sacrifice. It is a process of learning and growing each day. Evelyn understood that no one could make her feel valuable except herself. The love she needed did not come from others, it came from within. And as she learned to love and care for herself, she began to see that everything else would gradually fall into place. During this time, Evelyn also devoted herself to community, a group of middle-aged women in her area, where they shared stories of life, the challenges they had overcome, and how they continued to grow after hardship. It was a place where she felt welcomed, where she no longer feared being judged or overlooked. She learned that in such communities, love and respect are given freely, without conditions. She also began to take part in projects that supported women, helping those who were facing difficulties similar to what she had once endured. Even though her life had changed in many positive ways, there were still moments of a sense of emptiness. She sometimes remembered family dinners, the gatherings she had always tried to hold together. Even though she had chosen not to live for others anymore, loneliness would occasionally find its way into her heart. But she no longer allowed it to take control. She understood that loneliness was not something negative, but an opportunity to rediscover herself. She did not need anyone else's presence to feel whole. She was the one who created that sense of completeness. Then one day, while sitting in her study, Evelyn received an unexpected call from Daniel. Her grandson beat, a part of her, could not deny that she had been waiting for this call for a long time. She did not know what would come next, but unlike before, she was not afraid. She answered, and Daniel's voice came through. "Grandma, I know things can't be changed now, but I just want you to know that I deeply regret what happened. I've come to I'm sorry." She listened, and a gentle feeling rose within her. This was not an apology meant to erase the past, but a sign of Daniel's awareness and growth like her. Her grandson had gone through struggles and had come to understand that love is not something that can be bought with money, but something built on respect and understanding. Evelyn did not respond immediately. She listened and allowed the emotions she had long held back to surface. "I love you, Daniel," she said softly. "I just want you to is not an exchange or an expectation. It is about sharing and respect, and I am proud that you have realized that." After that call, Evelyn felt an unexpected sense of peace. She did not need forgiveness or apologies to continue living her life. She had learned that everyone has their own journey and strained herself to change others. What mattered was that she had learned to love and respect herself. Life was no longer a series of meaningless sacrifices, but a journey of self-discovery and self-mastery. With a gentle smile, Evelyn knew she had truly stepped out of the shadows of her past. She no longer had to live for others. She lived for herself, and that was all she needed to feel complete. That day, Evelyn woke up with a different feeling, not because of an unexpected call or any change from the outside, but because of a deep understanding of herself. She was no longer the woman who sought recognition from her family or from anyone else. With each passing day, she became more certain of the decisions she had made. She did not need forgiveness or attention from anyone to feel her worth. She had begun her journey of rediscovering herself, and now she could feel a freedom she had never known before. Not deny that after everything that had happened, there were still moments when she thought about her family. She remembered Thomas, the days when he was still a child, the nights she stayed awake caring for him when he was sick. She remembered the years when she was not only a mother and grandmother, but also a close companion to her children. But now, everything had changed. The people she had loved the most, the ones she had sacrificed for without hesitation, now treated her as if she no longer had any value. But Evelyn was no Thomas or Lauren could take advantage of. She had learned the most important lesson of her life. Love and respect cannot be bought with money, and a true family relationship must be built on respect, not exploitation. Even so, she no longer felt pain. The change within her did not come from expecting others to change, but from learning to respect and love herself first. So as each day passed, Evelyn no longer relationships. She no longer looked back at the past with regret or sorrow over her mistakes. Instead, she began living a new life, one that was truly her own. Every morning she woke up without fear of facing Thomas or Lauren. She had stopped to ask herself what life would be like if she no longer had to live for others. And the answer was that life was wonderful. Evelyn had found the peace she had always longed for. She, and to attend family events, no longer felt the pressure to always be there solving her children's problems. She had learned to respect herself, and she knew that the most important thing was to live according to her own desires, not according to expectations or pressure from anyone else. She began to spend more time on herself, learning and exploring new things. Evelyn's skills, personal finance, and even areas she had never thought she would be interested in before. She also took part in community activities where she met women who shared similar circumstances. She no longer felt alone because now she truly felt that her life had changed. One morning, while sitting in her study, Evelyn received an unexpected call. She had not expected Thus would reach out again. She looked at her phone, unsure how to react, but she knew she was ready for whatever might come. She answered, and Thomas's voice came through. Mom, I know I was wrong. I've realized that everything I did only hurt you. I'm truly sorry. I want to see you and talk. It's no longer harsh as before. There was change. There was regret in it. But Evelyn felt nothing except calmness. She did not feel meat or to listen to apologies anymore. She was strong enough not to be drawn back into these conversations. She had chosen to live for herself, and no one could change that decision. You misunderstood for a long time, Thomas, Evelyn said gently but firmly. You treated me like a tool, a source of money. And now, I no longer feel the need to change. I have chosen to live for myself. Silence followed. Evelyn knew Thomas was searching for something to say, but she did not want to hear it anymore. She no longer needed apologies, because she had learned a valuable lesson: respect, not from exchange or expectation. Finally, Thomas spoke again, his voice slightly choked. Mom, I understand. I just want you to know that I'm truly sorry. Evelyn did not respond immediately. She simply smiled softly, knowing she had I love you, Thomas. I just want you to understand that love is not something that can be bought. It must be built on respect and living for myself. The call ended, and Evelyn felt a peace she had never experienced before. She did not feel joy or satisfaction, only a sense of relief. She no longer had to live for others, no longer had to sacrifice herself to be loved. She had realized that from learning to love oneself. Evelyn continued her journey, not to seek forgiveness or recognition, but to live a meaningful and free life. She did not need to wait for anyone to change, because she knew she had already taken control of her own life, and that was all she needed. And so Evelyn's journey is not just a story of change, but a powerful reminder that we all have the right to decide our own lives, no matter how painful the past may have been. She found the courage to let go of what no longer served her, and in that freedom, she discovered a sense of peace and inner strength that no one could ever take away. Evelyn's journey stands as proof of the power of self-love and self-respect, and that each of us has the ability to rewrite our life story from a new beginning. If you find yourself standing at a crossroads in life, do not hesitate to change. Do not live according to the expectations of others, but live for yourself. Rediscover your strength, your confidence, and your self-love. Never forget that you deserve a life that is whole, free, and meaningful. Share this story with those you believe need to hear it. Do not hesitate to leave your thoughts in the comments. And if this story has inspired you, make sure to like and subscribe so you do not miss the next videos. Together, we share stories that change lives.